In the shadowed heart of Dormiria, where dreams fracture and the abyss stirs with ancient fury, Reverie faces a shattering truth. The mark on their arm isn't a curse, it's a key to unraveling a forgotten pact that could doom or save all realms. As the Harbinger rises, will embracing the darkness be their salvation or their undoing? It's the final part of Book 2, Mistwoven Legends. Threads of the Forgotten Part 2 by Raul. I'm Nyara, your host and narrator. Chapter 11. The Abyss Awakens. The confrontation was inevitable. Reverie had tracked Cyrena to an abandoned dreamscape on the edges of Dormiria, a place where reality felt thin and fragile, as if the abyss itself seeped through the cracks. The sky above was an unnatural swirl of black and violet, with pinpricks of light winking in and out like dying stars. The air was heavy, charged with a suffocating energy that set every nerve in Reverie's body on edge. Cyrena stood in the center of the dreamscape, her back turned, staring into a jagged rift that pulsed with ominous energy. The rift was like a wound in the fabric of Dormiria, radiating an otherworldly hum that made the ground tremble beneath Reverie's feet. "You shouldn't have come here," Cyrena said without turning around, her voice sharp and cold. Reverie stepped forward, their hand instinctively brushing against the mark on their arm, a symbol that had begun to ache more fiercely with each passing moment. "You left me no choice, Cyrena. Whatever you're doing, it's tearing Dormiria apart. This has to stop." Cyrena finally turned to face them, her silver hair catching the faint glow of the rift. Her eyes, once filled with a quiet intensity, now burned with an unsettling fervor. "Stop. Dormiria has been stagnant for centuries. Reverie, bound by the Council's lies, tethered to mortals who don't even realize the cost of their dreams. The Harbinger offers something greater, freedom. Freedom through destruction?" Reverie shot back. "That's not liberation, Cyrena. That's chaos." As Reverie spoke, the mark on their arm flared with a sudden, searing heat. They winced, clutching at it as an eerie glow began to seep through their skin. Cyrena's eyes flicked to the mark, and her expression shifted from defiance to something resembling triumph. "So it's true," she murmured, a sly smile curving her lips. "The abyss has chosen you." "I didn't choose this," Reverie snapped, struggling to suppress the surge of energy building within them. "And I won't let it control me." Cyrena took a step closer, her voice softening to a coaxing tone. "Control? That's not what the abyss is about, Reverie. It's about embracing the unknown, harnessing power without limits. You've felt it, haven't you? The freedom it offers." Reverie shook their head, the glow from the mark intensifying. "What I've felt is a power that destroys as much as it creates. It's not freedom, it's a prison." Cyrena's smile faltered, her frustration bleeding through. "You're blind, just like the Council. But maybe I can help you see." Before Reverie could respond, Cyrena raised her hands, and the rift behind her flared with dark energy. Tendrils of shadow surged forward, twisting and writhing like living things. Reverie reacted instinctively, weaving a barrier of light to shield themselves. The shadows collided with the barrier, sending shockwaves rippling through the dreamscape. But as the battle raged, the mark on Reverie's arm burned hotter, the glow spreading across their entire body. Their vision blurred, and a low, resonant hum filled their ears, a sound that seemed to come from deep within the abyss itself. "Reverie, stop fighting it." Cyrena called out, her voice carrying both urgency and desperation. "Let it in. Only then will you understand." "I won't," Reverie ground out, their voice strained as they fought to maintain control. But the abyss had other plans. With a sudden, uncontrollable surge, the energy within Reverie erupted. A blinding wave of abyssal light burst forth, sweeping across the dreamscape. The shadows Cyrena had summoned disintegrated instantly, and she was thrown backward, barely managing to shield herself from the force. When the light faded, the dreamscape was eerily silent. Cyrena lay sprawled on the ground, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Reverie stood frozen, their hands trembling as they stared at the faint wisps of dark energy still coiling around their fingertips. "What have I done?" they whispered, their voice hollow. Cyrena pushed herself to her feet, her expression unreadable as she regarded Reverie. "Now you see," she said softly, almost pityingly. "You can't deny what you are, Reverie. The Abyss has marked you for a reason." Reverie shook their head, their voice rising in defiance. This isn't me. I won't let it define me." Cyrena sighed, a hint of sadness in her gaze. "You're stronger than I thought, but strength alone won't save you from the truth." She turned, stepping toward the rift. "The Harbinger is coming, Reverie, and when it does, you'll have to choose which side you're on." Before Reverie could stop her, Cyrena disappeared into the rift, leaving them alone in the broken dreamscape. As the dreamscape began to collapse around them, Reverie summoned their remaining strength to stabilize it. But the act felt hollow, their mind consumed by the memory of the power they had unleashed. The mark on their arm was still faintly glowing, a constant reminder of the Abyss's grip on them. Returning to the quiet solace of their sanctum in Dormiria, Reverie sat in silence, replaying the encounter in their mind. Cyrena's words echoed like a haunting refrain. "You can't deny what you are." For the first time, they questioned whether they truly could resist the Abyss's influence, or whether they were already too far gone. Chapter 12. A Mortal's Nightmare. Reverie awoke to the pull of a mortal's cry for help, a call so piercing and desperate that it shattered the serenity of Dormiria's endless twilight. It was rare for such raw emotion to pierce the veil between realms. This nightmare was unlike any they had encountered before. Without hesitation, Reverie stepped through the gateway into the mortal's dreamscape. What greeted them on the other side was a storm of chaos, a vast, fragmented wasteland of broken memories and shifting shadows. The ground beneath their feet cracked and crumbled, revealing a yawning void that pulsed with abyssal energy. The air was thick with despair, an oppressive weight that threatened to suffocate. The mortal stood in the center of the nightmare, a young woman no older than 20, her form flickering like a candle in the wind. Her face was streaked with tears, her eyes wide with terror as she turned to face Reverie. You have to help me," she gasped. "It won't stop. It keeps coming back." Reverie stepped closer, their voice calm but firm. "What keeps coming back? Tell me what you see." As if in response to their question, the shadows around them began to writhe and coalesce, forming grotesque figures that loomed over the dreamscape. They were massive, faceless creatures with elongated limbs and gaping maws, their bodies emanating a sickly, pulsing glow. "The Harbinger," the woman whispered, her voice trembling. "It sent them. It's coming for me." Reverie's heart sank as they felt the unmistakable presence of the Abyss. The mark on their arm burned faintly, as if reacting to the correction that pervaded the dreamscape. They raised their hand, weaving threads of light to shield the woman from the encroaching figures. The barrier held, but barely. The creatures clawed at it with a ferocity that sent sparks flying. "This dreamscape is tethered to the Abyss," Reverie muttered to themselves. "But why? What does the Harbinger want with her?" The woman clung to Reverie's arm, her voice rising in panic. "It's my fault. I tried to forget, but it won't let me. It keeps showing me him." "Him?" Reverie turned to her, their expression urgent. "Who are you talking about?" Before she could answer, the dreamscape lurched violently, and the shadows erupted in a cacophony of shrieks. A massive figure began to rise from the void, its form shrouded in darkness, but its presence unmistakable. The Harbinger's influence was no longer subtle. It was here, The towering figure loomed over the broken dreamscape, its outline flickering like a flame. Though its face was obscured, Reverie felt its gaze pierce through them, as if it could see into the deepest corners of their soul. The mark on their arm flared to life, its glow matching the creature's pulsating aura. "You cannot save her," a voice boomed, deep and resonant, echoing from everywhere and nowhere at once. "This dream is mine." Reverie clenched their fists, summoning every ounce of their dream-weaving power. "She doesn't belong to you. Release her, or face me." The creature laughed, a sound that shook the ground and sent cracks splintering through the already fragile dreamscape. "You are marked by the Abyss, Dream Weaver. You cannot defy what you are." The creature lunged, its shadowy form crashing into Reverie's barrier. The force sent shockwaves rippling through the dreamscape, and Reverie staggered under the weight of the assault. But they held their ground, weaving threads of light and sound to push the creature back. The woman's scream cut through the chaos, and Reverie turned to see her being dragged toward the void by smaller, shadowy tendrils. Without hesitation, Reverie unleashed a burst of energy, severing the tendrils and pulling her to safety. "Stay close to me," they urged. "I won't let it take you." But even as they spoke, the mark on their arm pulsed again, and a strange power coursed through their veins. It was darker, sharper than the light they were used to wielding, but it responded to their will with startling precision. Reverie hesitated for only a moment before allowing it to flow, weaving the abyssal energy into their defenses. The shadows recoiled at the combination of light and abyssal power, and for the first time, the creature faltered. But as Reverie pressed their advantage, they felt a creeping unease. The abyss was feeding off their emotions, their fear, their desperation, and the more they used its power, the stronger it seemed to grow. The battle reached a fever pitch, with Reverie and the creature locked in a desperate struggle for control of the dreamscape. As they fought, fragments of the woman's memories began to surface, playing out around them like shards of glass. Reverie saw glimpses of a man, a figure shrouded in shadow, his face obscured but his presence menacing. The woman's voice echoed through the fragments, filled with anguish. He took everything from me. I tried to run, but he always found me, even in my dreams." Reverie's heart ached at the raw pain in her words. The nightmare wasn't just a random manifestation of fear. It was tied to her trauma, a wound the Harbinger was exploiting to its advantage. "This isn't just about her," Reverie realized, their voice trembling. "The Harbinger is using her despair to anchor itself here." With this realization, Reverie knew what they had to do. They turned to the woman, their expression firm. "I can drive it out, but you have to trust me. This will only work if you face your fear." She hesitated, her eyes filled with terror. I don't know if I can." "You can," Reverie said, their voice steady. "You're stronger than you think, and you're not alone." The woman nodded, a flicker of determination breaking through her fear. Together, they turned to face the creature, which had begun to reform itself, its shape more monstrous than ever. Reverie reached deep within themselves, drawing on both the light of Dormiria and the dark power of the abyss. The combination was volatile, unstable, but it was their only chance. They wove the energies into a single, concentrated strike, channeling it toward the creature. The blast hit with the force of a star imploding, tearing through the creature's form and ripping the dreamscape apart. For a moment, there was only silence, and then the fragments of the nightmare began to dissolve, replaced by a calm, serene landscape. The woman stood beside Reverie, her form solid and whole for the first time. She looked around in awe, tears streaming down her face. "It's gone. I don't feel it anymore." Reverie smiled faintly, though their own heart was heavy. The mark on their arm was dim, but its presence was a constant reminder of the power they had wielded and the cost. "You're safe now," they said softly, "but you have to keep fighting, even when it's hard. You're stronger than you know." She nodded, her gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you for everything." As she faded from the dreamscape, returning to the waking world, Reverie remained behind, staring at the horizon. The battle was won, but the war against the Harbinger was far from over. And with each passing day, the line between Dormiria and the Abyss grew thinner. Chapter 13. Fears Made Flesh. The nightmare drew Reverie in like a riptide, pulling them deeper than they had ever ventured before. The air within the dreamscape was suffused with an unnatural chill, heavy and oppressive. This was no ordinary nightmare. It pulsed with a malevolent intent that Reverie could feel in their very essence. For the first time, they hesitated, unsure of what awaited them in the shadows. As they moved through the murky dreamscape, they became aware of whispers surrounding them, faint at first but growing louder with each step. The voices weren't those of a Harbinger or its emissaries. They were familiar, chillingly so. "Why weren't you strong enough?" One voice hissed. "You failed them," another accused. "They see you for what you are, a traitor," a third whispered, dripping with malice. Reverie's hands trembled as the whispers converged into a cacophony, each word striking a raw nerve. These were not random taunts. They were echoes of their own doubts, their deepest fears brought to life. The ground beneath Reverie shifted, and the dreamscape transformed. They found themselves standing in a shattered version of Dormiria, its once luminous spires crumbling into dust. The council chambers lay in ruins, and the air was thick with the acrid scent of burning dreams. Figures began to materialize from the shadows, familiar faces of fellow lucid whispers, their expressions filled with contempt. "You were supposed to protect Dormiria," one spat, their voice laced with venom. "But you brought the Abyss here instead." "I didn't mean to," Reverie murmured, their voice faltering. "I was trying to help." "You've failed us all," another figure sneered, their form flickering as if caught between reality and shadow. "The Abyss grows stronger because of you. This is your legacy." The accusations cut deep, each one a dagger to their resolve. Reverie clenched their fists, trying to push back the rising tide of despair. "No," they said firmly, though their voice wavered. "This isn't real. It's the nightmare twisting my fears." But even as they spoke, doubt gnawed at the edges of their mind. What if it was true? What if their actions had doomed Dormiria? The scene shifted again, plunging Reverie into a suffocating darkness. When the shadows parted, they found themselves staring into a mirror-like surface. At first, their reflection seemed normal, but as they stepped closer, it began to change. The mark of the Abyss on their arms spread like ink, creeping across their skin until it consumed their entire form. Their reflection sneered, its eyes glowing with a sickly, malevolent light. "This is who you are," the reflection said, its voice dripping with malice. "A creature of the Abyss, no matter how much you pretend otherwise." Reverie shook their head, stepping back. "I'm not like you. I control the Abyss. It doesn't control me." The reflection laughed, a chilling sound that reverberated through the dreamscape. "Do you? Look at what you've done. Every time you've used its power, you've let it in. It's only a matter of time before it consumes you." The reflection stepped out of the mirror, its form solidifying into a twisted version of Reverie. The mark on its arm pulsed with a dark energy, mirroring the fear in Reverie's heart. The two faced off, light and shadow entwined. The nightmare shifted once more, and Reverie found themselves standing in the heart of Dormiria. The city of dreams was eerily silent, its vibrant colors muted and lifeless. The spires were cracked, the skies dull and gray. At the center of it all stood a massive tear in the fabric of reality, a gaping wound that bled shadows. From within the tear, Reverie could hear the Harbinger's voice, low and mocking. "This is the fate you've chosen," it intoned. "Dormeria will fall, and it will be your doing." Figures began to emerge from the shadows, not as faceless nightmares, but as the mortals Reverie had sworn to protect. Each one looked at them with pleading eyes, their voices a chorus of despair. "Save us," they cried. "Don't let it take us. Please, Reverie, don't fail us." Reverie dropped to their knees, overwhelmed by the weight of their failure. The mark on their arm burned hotter than ever, a searing reminder of their growing connection to the abyss. As the three fears surrounded them, Reverie realized that this nightmare was not just an assault, it was a test. The Harbinger was playing on their insecurities, trying to break their spirit and push them further into the abyss. But Reverie wasn't alone. The memory of the mortal they had saved, the woman who had faced her own nightmare with courage, gave them strength. "This is not who I am," Reverie said, their voice steady despite the chaos around them. "I am more than my fears. I am more than my doubts." They stood, their light flaring brighter than ever. Drawing on their dream-weaving abilities, they began to reshape the nightmare. The ruins of Dormeria repaired themselves, the shadows retreated, and the dark version of themselves dissolved into nothingness. "This is my dreamscape," Reverie declared. "You have no power here." The oppressive darkness began to lift, replaced by the soft, golden glow of Dormeria's twilight. The figures of the mortals faded, their cries replaced by a soothing silence. Reverie stood alone in the center of the dreamscape, their mark dim and quiet. Though they had won this battle, the fears lingered in their heart. They knew the Harbinger would not stop until it had broken them completely. But for now, they had proven to themselves that they were stronger than their doubts. As the nightmare dissolved, Reverie whispered a vow to the fading light. "I will not let fear define me. Dormeria will not fall, not while I still stand." And with that, they returned to the waking world, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Chapter 14. Threads of the Forgotten. Reverie's days after the nightmare were consumed with research. The Codex of Reveries, vast and cryptic, became their constant companion. Each page felt like peeling back a layer of Dormeria's carefully curated history, only to uncover unsettling truths. Whispers of an ancient connection between the abyss and Dormeria persisted, threads of a forgotten past woven into the fabric of both realms. But it was in the faded, merely illegible pages of the Codex that Reverie stumbled upon something truly revelatory. The text spoke of the Harmonium era, an age when the abyss and Dormeria were not adversaries but partners. Dreamweavers had once drawn upon the abyss as an integral part of their craft, using its raw energy to stabilize and deepen the dreamscapes of mortals. Reverie's breath caught as they read the passages, the words unraveling centuries of the Council's dogma. Dormeria's rulers had suppressed this knowledge, labeling the abyss as a chaotic, corrupting force. But the Codex hinted at a different story. The abyss had once been a wellspring of creativity, a source of boundless possibility. It was not the abyss itself that had brought about its severance from Dormeria, but fear, an event referred to only as the fracture had turned allies into enemies. The details of the schism were sparse, intentionally erased or obscured, but the implications were staggering. Reverie's thoughts raced. If the abyss was once part of Dormeria, what was its true purpose? And why would the Council go to such lengths to bury this knowledge? As Reverie delved deeper into the Codex, the mark on their arm began to tingle, faintly at first, but with growing intensity. It wasn't painful, but it carried a strange weight, as if something or someone was watching them. Reverie hesitated before placing their hand over the mic, closing their eyes. The dreamscape shifted around them, transporting them into an unfamiliar realm. It wasn't Dormiria, nor was it the Abyss. It was a place suspended between the two, an ethereal void where fragments of memory floated like shards of glass. Reverie reached out to one of the shards, their fingers brushing against its surface. Instantly, they were pulled into a vision. A grand assembly unfolded before their eyes, held in a luminous hall that seemed both ancient and eternal. Lucid whispers stood side by side with figures cloaked in shadow, their forms fluid and shifting like the abyss itself. They were not enemies here, they were collaborators. The shadowed figures wove threads of dark energy into the dreamscapes, their movements harmonious with the light weaving of the whispers. "This balance is sacred," an authoritative voice declared. Reverie turned to see a figure who radiated both light and shadow, their presence commanding. The Abyss and Dormiria are two sides of the same coin. Together, we create dreams that heal, inspire, and endure. The scene shifted abruptly. Chaos erupted as screams echoed through the hall. The shadowed figures recoiled, their forms twisting as if in pain. A rift tore through the air, severing the connection between the two realms. Reverie watched as Dormiria's leaders, their faces grim, turned their backs on the Abyss. "The Abyss cannot be controlled," one of them said. "Its chaos will destroy us." "It is not chaos, it is possibility," another argued, their voice drowned out as the whole dissolved into darkness. Reverie gasped as the vision ended, their mic glowing faintly in the dim light of the dreamscape. The revelation left them shaken but resolute. The Abyss was not an enemy. It was a force misunderstood and abandoned out of fear. The Harbinger's goal, they realized, was not just destruction. It sought to sever the last threads of this ancient bond, erasing the Abyss's role in Dormiria's creation entirely. Reverie's mind churned with questions. Why had the Council hidden this truth? And why had the Harbinger emerged now, after centuries of silence? The answers seemed tied to the Abyss, and to their mark, a connection they had barely begun to understand. As they closed the codex, Reverie made a vow. They would uncover the full truth, no matter the cost. If the Abyss and Dormiria were once united, then perhaps they could be again. But to do so, they would have to confront both the Harbinger and the Council, challenging centuries of fear and tradition. The threads of the forgotten past were unraveling, and Reverie would ensure they were woven anew. Chapter 15. Allies and Shadows. The moon hung low in the sky, its pale light barely breaking through the clouds that seemed to swirl like an ink blot against the dark canvas of the night. Reverie stood at the edge of the forgotten veil, the ground beneath their feet soft and unnaturally quiet. The air here felt heavy, thick with something that was neither warmth nor cold, but something older, something ancient. It was the kind of place where secrets were buried in the earth and whispered on the wind, where the very stones seemed to watch and wait. Beside them, a small group of individuals stood silent, their faces hidden beneath dark cloaks. These were the Dreamweavers, an enigmatic faction with powers tied to the Abyss, the realm of dreams and nightmares that had once been a forgotten myth, but was now a horrifying reality. The group was small, barely a handful, but they wielded powers that few could understand, much less control. Reverie's thoughts were a maelstrom. The task ahead was both their salvation and their damnation. They had been searching for the truth about the Harbinger for what felt like an eternity, and every lead had brought them here, to the edge of this forsaken place, where the boundaries between dreams and reality were as fragile as gossamer threads. A fragile alliance had been formed between Reverie and the Dreamweavers. It had come with difficulty, trust stretched thin between them, but necessity made strange bedfellows. The Dreamweavers, despite their power and knowledge, were outcasts. They were feared, misunderstood, and often shunned. And yet, they believed that the Abyss, the very force that had twisted so many, could be wielded responsibly. They believed they had the ability to peer into the darkest corners of the world, to discern the truth buried there. The question that burned in Revery's mind was simple. Could they truly trust these shadowed allies? Or were they, too, merely another part of the darkness they sought to unravel? Reverie turned to face the group, their minds sharp with caution. They knew better than to underestimate those who walked in the shadows. The Dreamweavers were not a monolithic group. They had their own factions, ideologies, and ambitions. But one thing united them: their connection to the Abyss. It was their blood, their curse, their gift. And it was that power that had drawn Reverie into an uneasy alliance with them. The leader of the group, a tall figure cloaked in deep purple, stepped forward. Their name was Seraphiel, though few knew the truth of their past. Some said Seraphiel had been a priest, others a scholar who had stumbled too deeply into the mysteries of the Abyss. But the Dreamweavers themselves did not care for the past. They were focused on the future, on controlling the Abyss rather than succumbing to it. Why you're here, Reverie," Seraphiel said, their voice smooth, like the rustling of silk. "The Harbinger's origins are tied to the Abyss, and we can help you uncover that truth. But you must understand the price." Reverie clenched their fists. Unaware of the risks, they said, their voice low and steady, "I've seen the destruction the Abyss can cause, and I know that if we fail, the consequences will be catastrophic." Seraphiel's lips curled into a faint smile, but it was a smile that didn't reach their eyes. "You speak of the Abyss as though it is a force beyond control, but that is the mistake of the uninitiated. The Abyss is not merely a void of chaos. It is a tool, a power that can be harnessed, shaped, but only if one has the strength to wield it." Reverie felt a chill run down their spine. It wasn't the words themselves, but the conviction behind them that unsettled them. These people believed they could control the Abyss, could bend it to their will. It was dangerous, intoxicating, and more than anything, unpredictable. "How do you intend to find the truth?" Reverie asked, pushing the thoughts of doubt aside for the moment. "The Harbinger is a shadow, an enigma. Every path we've taken has led us to dead ends." The figure beside, Seraphiel, a wiry, pale woman with sharp features, spoke up. "The Abyss does not deal in simple truths, Reverie. It reveals fragments, pieces of the puzzle. We must go deeper, farther than anyone has dared before. We must navigate the forgotten realms of dreams, where time and space lose their meaning. There, we might find what you seek." Her name was Nissa, and she was one of the most powerful of the Dreamweavers. Reverie had heard rumors that Nissa had once been consumed by the Abyss, lost to it for years before emerging with strange abilities, and perhaps a deeper understanding of the true nature of the dreams. "Tell me more about the Abyss," Reverie said, forcing their voice to remain neutral. They needed to understand everything, every risk, every secret, before they could decide whether to proceed. Seraphiel gestured toward the swirling fog that hung over the veil. "The Abyss is a place of infinite possibilities, where one's deepest fears and desires manifest. It is a realm outside of time, a place where thoughts become reality and nightmares are given form. But not all who enter return, and those who do often come back, changed." Nissa added, her voice like a whisper of wind. "Some are driven mad by it. Others become something else entirely. The Harbinger, if it is indeed tied to the Abyss, is something born from this twisted realm. Perhaps it is not a being at all, but a manifestation of the Abyss itself, a force, a tide, an echo of the void." Reverie swallowed. The thought of a force, something unknowable and all-consuming, being the origin of the Harbinger, sent a shiver down their spine. Could the Harbinger, be the embodiment of everything the Abyss represented? The following days were a blur. Reverie and the dream weavers ventured deeper into the veil, toward the heart of the Abyss's influence. As they journeyed, the world around them seemed to warp and shift. The sky itself grew darker, the air colder, shadows twisted unnaturally, and the very ground beneath their feet seemed unstable, as though reality itself was slowly fracturing. They arrived at the entrance to an ancient cavern, a yawning mouth of darkness that seemed to swallow the light. This was the threshold to the Abyss. Seraphiel turned to Reverie, their expression unreadable. This is where the truth lies. But remember, Reverie, once you step inside, you cannot turn back. The Abyss will not let you go without a price. Reverie nodded. I understand. Together, they crossed the threshold. The air inside the cavern was thick, suffused with the raw energy of dreams. It pulsed with a strange rhythm, as if the very walls of the cavern were alive, breathing with the power of the Abyss. In the distance, the faint glow of light flickered, fragments of memories and dreams manifesting in the form of glowing orbs. Reverie reached out to touch one, but it recoiled, vanishing into the air like a puff of smoke. Mrs. stood beside them, her eyes distant. The Abyss does not welcome outsiders, she said quietly, but we will force it to reveal what we need. As they delved deeper into the Abyss, the dream weavers began their ritual. Seraphiel and Missile led the others in a chant, their voices rising in eerie harmony as they invoked the power of the Abyss. The cavern seemed to tremble, and the very air crackled with dark energy. Reverie stood apart from the group, feeling the weight of the Abyss pressing against them. Their thoughts began to blur, and the shadows that danced at the edges of their vision seemed to beckon. Whispers filled the air, voices of the forgotten, of those who had lost themselves in the depths. A vision appeared before Reverie. The Harbinger, faint, fragmented, but unmistakably present. It was not a man, not a single entity. It was an amalgamation, a swirling mass of darkness and light, shifting and writhing like a living nightmare. And then, a voice, low, guttural, and ancient, spoke from the depths of the vision. You seek the truth, but the truth is not what you think. The Harbinger is the Abyss. It is the end and the beginning. There is no escape from it. Reverie staggered back, their heart pounding. The vision dissolved, leaving only the silence of the Abyss. As the dream weavers continued their ritual, Reverie was left with the haunting words echoing in their mind. The Harbinger was the Abyss. It was not a person, not a weapon, but something far darker. And the more they uncovered, the deeper the shadows grew. The alliance, fragile as it was, now seemed even more uncertain. The Abyss had given them a glimpse of the truth, but at what cost? Reverie felt the weight of that knowledge settle on their shoulders, and the question remained, what were they willing to sacrifice in order to learn more? Could they control the Abyss, or would it control them? Chapter 16. The Forgotten Pact. The cavern was eerily silent. Reverie could feel the weight of the Abyss pressing in on all sides, its influence creeping along their skin, sending shivers through their spine. For days, they had combed through forgotten texts, cryptic inscriptions, and fragments of memories lost to time. Each discovery seemed to lead to another question, deeper into the maze of uncertainty. But now, at the heart of the Abyss, something had changed. A revelation was stirring, something that had long been buried, locked away by those who had dared to meddle with forces beyond comprehension. Here, Seraphiel's voice echoed softly in the cavern, reverberating off the stone walls. They held a worn, leather-bound tome in their hands, its pages yellowed and fragile. This is what we sought, the Forgotten Pact. Reverie stepped closer, their pulse quickening as the dim light of the cavern illuminated the ancient text. The symbols were archaic, some even more so than the language they had encountered before. It was a strange mixture of words, images, and sigils, as if the pact itself had been written not just in language, but in the very fabric of reality. Seraphiel began to translate the text aloud, their voice reverent, though tinged with a hint of unease. The pact, Seraphiel began, was forged in the early days of creation, when the boundaries between the physical world and the realm of dreams were still fluid, shifting like the sands of time. Dormiria, the ancient god of creation, sought to ensure balance in the universe. But this balance was delicate. Creation and destruction, order and chaos, they were two forces that could not exist without the other. And so, Dormiria made a pact with the Abyss. The words of the pact revealed themselves, laden with gravity. I, Dormiria, god of creation, do bind my essence to the Abyss, keeper of dreams and nightmares. Through this pact, I shall grant the Abyss its place as the guardian of both creation and destruction, weaving the threads of existence in dreams, to ensure that neither shall dominate. In return, the Abyss shall be held in check, balanced, by my will, that neither creation nor destruction shall rise without the other. Reverie listened intently, the significance of these words sinking in. The Abyss had been kept in check, its dark influence restrained by the will of Dormiria. It had always been a force that could swing either way, but the pact had ensured that it would never become a chaotic, uncontrollable void. But why did the Abyss need to be kept in check? Reverie asked, their voice barely a whisper. The implications were too vast to comprehend all at once. Seraphiel turned to them, eyes narrowed with thought. The Abyss is not merely a realm of nightmares. It is the birthplace of all dreams. It is a force that shapes the very nature of reality, where the boundaries of creation and destruction are blurred. Without balance, the Abyss would have the power to twist existence, to unravel the fabric of the universe itself. Reverie felt a sinking feeling in their stomach. This was the force they had been dealing with all along. The Abyss was no mere backdrop for the events that had unfolded. It was the very heart of the struggle between creation and destruction. As the dream weavers pored over the rest of the text, another section caught their attention. It described a moment in time when the pact had been broken, an event that had led to the chaos Reverie had witnessed firsthand. The balance faltered, for the bond was not unbreakable. When the chosen one, the Harbinger, arose from the depths, the pact was severed. The Abyss, freed from its chains, began to stir with wrath, and creation and destruction clashed in dreams, spilling over into reality. The Harbinger's rise is the sign of the breach, an omen that the world will teeter on the edge of oblivion. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Reverie felt their heart race. The Harbinger's rise had not been a mere coincidence, nor the result of some random event. It had been the catalyst, the moment when the delicate balance between the forces of creation and destruction shattered. The Harbinger, Reverie muttered, it's not just a person. It's the breaking of the pact itself. Seraphiel nodded grimly. Yes, the Harbinger is a force that arose when the boundary between creation and destruction was breached, a being, or perhaps a manifestation, born of the Abyss when the balance was lost. The Harbinger represents the chaos unleashed when the pact failed. Reverie's mind raced as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The dream weavers had suspected for some time that the rise of the Harbinger was no ordinary event. Now it was clear. The Harbinger was the embodiment of the breach in the pact between Dormiria and the Abyss, and its very existence threatened to unravel the fragile balance that held the world together. As they continued to study the tome, Reverie's thoughts turned darker. The more they learned about the Abyss, the more they realized how deeply tied the Harbinger was to the very fabric of reality. And worse, the more they understood, the more they began to suspect that they themselves might be entwined in the fate of the abyss. The dreams had been more vivid lately, more insistent. Echoes of the Harbinger's presence filled Revery's mind. Every shadow seemed to stretch further, and every whisper of the wind felt like a call, drawing them deeper into the unknown. Revery's hand trembled slightly as they turned the page of the tome. It was a subtle movement, but Seraphiel noticed. "You suspect something, don't you?" Reverie paused, their breath catching in their throat. I think I've always suspected. The Harbinger's rise. This isn't just an accident. It's part of something larger. And I'm afraid I'm a part of it too." Seraphiel's eyes narrowed, but there was no judgment in their gaze, only understanding. The abyss does not care for those it touches. It will use you if you let it. Reverie swallowed hard, the weight of their own growing fears pressing down on them. What if I'm already too far gone? What if the pact being broken is my fault, and the Harbinger is the result of my actions? There was a long silence. Missa, who had been standing off to the side, finally spoke up. "You're not alone in this, Reverie. The abyss does not choose its vessels lightly. But whatever your role is, it is not the end. Not yet." Reverie looked at her, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. "What do you mean?" Missa stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. "The pact was broken long before you came into the picture. The Harbinger's rise was inevitable. You may be part of this, but you're not the cause. We have to stop the damage the breach has done before it's too late. We can still find a way to restore balance, but it will take everything we have." Reverie nodded, though doubt lingered in their chest. The path ahead seemed darker now, the stakes higher than ever before. They had uncovered the truth, the forgotten pact, the rupture, the Harbinger. But the true cost of that knowledge was still unclear. And as they stood at the edge of the abyss, they had to decide. Would they restore the balance, or would they succumb to the darkness that threatened to consume them all? Days turned into weeks as Reverie and the Dreamweavers continued to search for answers, their progress slow and painstaking. Each new discovery revealed more of the abyss's intricate nature, but it also revealed just how deep the corruption had already spread. The balance was not something that could easily be restored. The rupture in the pact had unleashed a tide of chaos that was difficult to contain, but Reverie's suspicions only grew stronger. The more they delved into the abyss, the more they felt the pull of its power. It was seductive, promising the answers to questions that had haunted them for years. It whispered of untold knowledge, of control over the very fabric of reality. But it also whispered of destruction. The tension within the alliance began to rise. Seraphiel, ever focused, believed they could still use the abyss to their advantage. Nissa, however, was more cautious. She saw the danger, and she feared that the Dreamweavers were too eager to take risks in their pursuit of knowledge. As Reverie walked alone through the darkened halls of their temporary stronghold, they couldn't shake the feeling that the abyss was watching them, waiting, whispering, and perhaps it was waiting for them to make the final choice. Chapter 17. Confronting the Harbinger. The journey to the edge of Dormiria had been long and treacherous. Reverie and their small band of allies had crossed lands uncharted, skirting the edges of the dream realm, following whispers of an ancient energy that pulsed like a living thing. The further they traveled, the more distorted the world around them became. Time seemed to bend and fracture, and the boundaries between the waking world and the realm of dreams grew indistinct. But there was no turning back now. Reverie stood at the precipice of what could only be described as the final frontier, where the dream realm and the abyss met, their tumultuous currents colliding with a violent destructive force. Here, the veil between realities was thin. Here, where the fabric of creation and destruction had once been carefully woven together by Dormiria's pact, all that remained was chaos. The winds howled, their voices familiar yet foreign. Reverie could feel the weight of their thoughts becoming heavy, as if the abyss itself was calling out to them. But it wasn't just the abyss. It was the Harbinger. Seraphiel had warned them of the dangers. To face the Harbinger is to face oblivion, the leader of the Dreamweavers had said, their tone grave. The Harbinger is the embodiment of distraction. It is a force born of the rupture. It cannot be reasoned with, and it cannot be defeated by conventional means. But Reverie's mind was resolute. They had to try. The Harbinger was the key, the reason the world teetered on the brink of collapse. If they could stop it, or even slow it down, they might have a chance to restore the balance the Pact had once ensured. Are you sure about this? Missa asked quietly, her voice a mere breath in the wind. She was standing a few paces behind, her face shrouded by the dark cloak that had become a symbol of the Dreamweavers. Reverie turned to face her, their eyes unwavering. We don't have a choice. The Harbinger is the answer we've been searching for, and the only way to stop the flood of destruction is to confront it head-on. Missa looked at them, her sharp eyes reflecting a mix of concern and resolve. Then let's make it quick. The landscape ahead was unlike anything Reverie had ever seen. The sky was a swirling mass of black and silver, with streaks of red that flickered like dying embers. The ground beneath their feet was cracked and uneven, large rifts opening up as if the very earth itself had been torn apart. Beyond this wasteland, a towering figure loomed in the distance, its form flickering in and out of focus like a mirage. The Harbinger was here. With every step they took, Reverie felt the air growing heavier, thicker with the weight of dreams and nightmares. The pressure was almost unbearable, and for a moment, Reverie wondered if they were truly prepared for what they were about to face. Stay alert, Seraphiel whispered, his voice a low growl as they moved forward. The Harbinger can manipulate this realm. It will use your fears, your doubts, against you. Reverie nodded, their grip tightening around the hilt of their blade. It was a symbolic gesture more than anything. No weapon could truly defeat the Harbinger. But it was something, a reminder that they still had control over something in this maddening place. As they approached the center of the ruined landscape, the ground trembled. The Harbinger turned to face them. It was not a creature in the traditional sense. It was a shifting mass of darkness, its form ever-changing. One moment, it was a shadowy figure with eyes that burned like twin stars. The next, it was a roiling storm of smoke and flame. Its very presence warped the world around it, bending reality to its will. You have come, the Harbinger's voice echoed, a distorted amalgamation of countless voices, both terrifying and mesmerizing. It was as though every nightmare and every forgotten dream had been poured into it, shaping it into this twisted entity. Reverie's heart pounded in their chest. We came to end this, they said, their voice steady despite the fear that clawed at their throat. We came to restore the balance. The Pact must be repaired. The Harbinger's laugh was a low, rumbling sound, like thunder cracking across a storm. You think you can undo what has been done? You think you can fix the rift between creation and destruction? It stepped closer, its massive form distorting the very air around them. I am the result of the Pact's breaking. I am the consequence of that choice. There is no going back. Reverie took a step forward, despite the overwhelming presence of the Harbinger. There's always a way back. The Pact can still be restored. Dormiria's will can still be honored. The Harbinger's eyes narrowed, its form flickering as though it were about to strike. You cannot fight fate. You cannot fight what I am. You are nothing but a fleeting thought in the endless void. In that moment, the air seemed to crack, and the abyss itself surged forward, rushing to fill the space between them. Reverie barely had time to react as the darkness pressed in on them, swallowing them whole. The world around them shattered into 1,000 fragments, each piece a different nightmare, a different memory, a different fear. Reverie was falling, tumbling through the darkness as visions assaulted them from every direction. They saw faces, old friends, forgotten enemies, and fleeting strangers, all distorted, twisted into grotesque parodies. They saw visions of the world breaking apart, of everything they had fought for slipping through their fingers. They saw the Harbinger, its face, its eyes, its very presence looming over them, an unstoppable force. The ground beneath their feet was gone, replaced by an endless abyss of swirling blackness. Reverie reached out, trying to grasp onto anything, but there was nothing to hold on to. The more they struggled, the deeper they sank. A voice cut through the chaos, a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. "You cannot escape," it said. "The Harbinger is the end. It is what must be. All things end, and you are no exception." But Reverie refused to surrender. They couldn't, not when everything they had worked for was on the line. With a surge of willpower, Reverie summoned the strength to push back against the dark force that sought to consume them. They reached deep within, calling on the last reserves of their power, the very essence of their being, and pushed forward, breaking through the waves of nightmares that threatened to drown them. As they broke through the darkness, Reverie found themselves standing once more on solid ground, barely. The Harbinger was looming before them, its form now fully manifested. It was enormous, a towering behemoth of shifting shadows and flame, its eyes blazing with the fury of the abyss. It reached out with an arm that seemed to stretch endlessly, and in that moment, Reverie knew they could not win this fight. But they had one chance. With all the strength they could muster, Reverie lunged forward, their blade raised high. The Harbinger's hand came down with crushing force, but Reverie ducked just in time, merrily avoiding the deadly strike. The shockwave from the attack sent Reverie sprawling to the ground, gasping for air. But they were not done. In the chaos, Reverie caught a glimpse of something in the depths of the Harbinger's form. A flicker of light, a spark of Dormiria's presence, still clinging to the fractured remnants of the Pact. It was faint, barely noticeable, but it was enough. Reverie knew what they had to do. With a final, desperate effort, they reached out, focusing everything on that small, flickering light. They would repair the rift, not with force, but with understanding. But the Harbinger was too powerful. Its hand reached down once more, and this time there was no avoiding it. Reverie felt the crushing weight of the abyss close in, and as the world went black, they knew they had failed. The last thing they heard before the darkness consumed them was the Harbinger's voice, triumphant and cold. "You were never meant to win." Chapter 18. Abyssal Resilience. Reverie awoke in darkness, a silence so profound it felt as though time itself had stopped. Their body was bruised and broken, their breath shallow, ragged, as they lay on the cold, unwielding stone of an unfamiliar landscape. The remnants of the Harbinger's attack still clung to them like a weight, pressing them deeper into the depths of the abyss. They had failed. The last remnants of the Pact, of Dormiria's will, had been nothing but a fleeting spark in the vastness of the abyss. The Harbinger was still alive. The world still teetered on the brink of destruction. But there was something different this time. A flicker of defiance sparked within Reverie's chest, rising from the depths of despair like a tide against the crushing force of the abyss. "I can't give up. Not yet." They pushed themselves upright, their hands shaking as they wiped away the blood that stained their lips. The pain was unbearable, yet it grounded them. It reminded them that they were still alive, and that meant there was still a chance to change things. The abyss was no longer a foreign realm. It had touched them deeply, connected with them in a way that was far more personal than they had ever anticipated. Its influence was in their veins, its whispers in their ears. It had once been a threat, an unstoppable force, but now it felt like a part of them, an inescapable part. Reverie clenched their fists, feeling the strange, pulsating energy flowing through them. It wasn't just darkness, it was power. Raw, unrefined power. They could feel it building within, wrapping around their essence like tendrils of shadow, pulling at them, coaxing them into submission. But they refused to yield. They were not its servant. They would control it. Reverie's mind raced as they tried to make sense of the overwhelming energy that surrounded them. The abyss was more than just a realm of destruction. It was alive, a manifestation of primal forces that had been contained, locked away by the pact Dormiria had forged. And now, that pact had been broken. The power of the abyss was wild, unpredictable. It had merely consumed them before, turned them into something unrecognizable. But now it was almost as if it recognized them, as if the abyss was reaching out, attempting to merge with their very soul. It was tempting to let go completely, to let the abyss consume them, to surrender to the chaos and destruction that it promised. But Reverie understood something now. The abyss was not just a force of chaos. It was a force of creation and destruction in equal measure, a reflection of all that existed in the world of dreams. It was the source of both light and shadow, and Reverie could learn to control it. With trembling hands, they closed their eyes and reached out, extending their will into the vastness of the abyss. They focused on the swirling darkness, letting it surround them like a storm. The force was immense, threatening to tear them apart, but Reverie anchored themselves. They sought the center of it, where the core of its power lay, its essence, the heart of the abyss. It was a battle of wills. Reverie could feel their mind stretching, expanding, as they pushed against the pressure of the abyss, forcing it to yield to their command. It fought back, writhing, clawing, thrashing like an animal trapped in a cage, but Reverie held fast, focused on one single thought: control. Slowly, agonizingly so, the abyss began to calm. Reverie's body trembled with the strain, but they refused to let go. They could feel the energy coursing through them, a swirling maelstrom of creation and destruction, of light and shadow. And they could wield it, they could shape it. At that moment, Reverie realized the truth. The abyss was not a force to be feared. It was a force to be understood. And by understanding it, they could become something more than human, something more than the Harbinger. They could be the bridge, the balance between the two realms. The world around Reverie began to change. The once distant shadows of the abyss now felt like an extension of themselves. The dark energy coursed through them, but it was no longer overwhelming. Instead, it was fluid, malleable. Reverie could feel it shaping itself to their will, bending and twisting in ways they had never imagined. They were no longer the abyss's victim. They were its master. They stood, unsteady at first, but growing stronger with each passing second. The ground beneath them seemed to tremble in response, as if acknowledging their newfound control over the realm. As Reverie took their first steps forward, the shadows parted before them, as if the abyss itself was yielding to them. They extended their senses outward, feeling the pulse of the world of dreams, the distant hum of creation, and the jagged edge of destruction. They were in tune with it all. Reverie. The voice, faint but unmistakable, came from behind them. Reverie turned to see Seraphiel, Nissa, and the rest of the dream weavers approaching cautiously. Their faces were etched with concern, but there was something else in their eyes, a spark of hope. You survived, Nissa said, her voice a mixture of relief and awe. We thought the Harbinger had taken you. Reverie nodded, their expression solemn but resolute. I almost let it, but I've learned something. The Abyss isn't just a weapon of destruction. It's the source of all things, creation and destruction, light and shadow. And now I can control it. I've become the bridge between the two realms. The dream weavers exchanged uncertain glances. Seraphiel stepped forward, his voice quiet but filled with awe. You've changed. You're different. But this power, this connection to the Abyss, it's dangerous. If you lose control, there may be no coming back. I won't lose control, Reverie replied, their voice unwavering. I understand it now. The Abyss is part of me, and I am part of it. I can wield its power without becoming its puppet. Nissa raised an eyebrow, skepticism still lingering in her gaze. And what does that mean for us? For the world, the Abyss was never meant to be controlled. Even if you've mastered it, its nature is unpredictable. Reverie paused, considering her words. I won't let it destroy everything. But the Harbinger, it is the force that arose from the rupture. If we are to stop it, we must do more than fight it with weapons. We must become the balance, create a new pact between the realms of creation and destruction. A pact that can restore the harmony that was lost. Seraphiel studied them for a long moment before nodding, slowly. Then we'll follow you, Reverie. If you can truly control this power, if you can become the bridge, then perhaps there is hope after all. Reverie felt a surge of determination rise within them. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger, but they were no longer alone. They had allies, and together they would face the Harbinger, confront the Abyss, and restore the balance that had been broken. But first they would need to prepare. The Harbinger was still out there, waiting, and the final battle was yet to come. Chapter 19. A Glimmer of Truth. The dream weavers had gathered around a fire, its flickering light casting long shadows on the stone walls. Reverie sat at the center, the flames dancing in their eyes, but their mind was elsewhere, on the visions that had come to them in the depths of the Abyss. Since their confrontation with the Harbinger, their connection to the Abyss had only deepened. The once overwhelming power now felt like a steady undercurrent flowing through their every thought and action. They could no longer deny it. The Abyss was not just a force of destruction, but a force that had been rejected, severed from its original purpose. The truth about the Harbinger had become clearer in the silence of the Abyss. It was not a being born from pure malice. It was not a creature with a singular purpose, but a consequence of an ancient wound, one that had been left to fester in the wake of Dormiria's choice. Reverie could see it now, like a tapestry woven with shadows. The pact that once bound the realms of creation and destruction had been broken long ago, and the Harbinger was its scar. It had been rejected by the Abyss, cast out when Dormiria had severed their bond with the dark forces of the dream realm in an attempt to restore order and balance. In the rupture, the Abyss had been wounded, its essence divided, and the Harbinger had been born, a fragment of the Abyss's anger and resentment. The Harbinger was not an agent of destruction. It was the Abyss's refusal to accept its separation from the realm of creation. It was an entity formed out of the very discord between light and shadow. Reverie stood before the gathering of dreamweavers, their figure illuminated by the flickering firelight. The weight of their discovery hung heavily in the air, a truth that threatened to shatter everything they thought they knew about the Harbinger, the Abyss, and their own place within it. I've seen it, Reverie said, their voice steady but filled with an unspoken urgency. The Harbinger, it isn't just a force of chaos. It's a remnant of the Abyss itself, a manifestation of the rejection the Abyss suffered when Dormiria severed their ancient bond. The dream weavers exchanged confused glances. Seraphiel, who had been quiet throughout the discussion, stepped forward, his eyes narrowed in disbelief. A remnant, he asked. You're saying that the Harbinger is a result of the pact being broken? that it was cast out, exiled from the abyss. Reverie nodded, their expression resolute. Exactly. The Harbinger is the abyss's rejection, its anger. It is not a natural creation. It is a wound, a scar that has festered for centuries. The rupture between creation and destruction left a hole in the fabric of existence, and the Harbinger is the product of that wound. Mrs. voice was low, tinged with disbelief. But how can we defeat something that was born of the abyss itself? If the Harbinger is a part of it, how do we even begin to stop it? Reverie's gaze turned inward for a moment, reflecting on the deep connection they had forged with the abyss. The shadows that had once threatened to consume them now whispered to them in a language only they could understand. They could feel the pulse of the abyss, a restless, aching pulse, like a heart broken long ago. It wasn't just a power to control. It was a cry for healing, a longing to be reunited with what it had lost. The answer isn't in fighting the Harbinger, Reverie said, their voice growing stronger. We can't destroy it. What we need to do is restore balance. The bond between Dormiria and the abyss was never meant to be severed. It was meant to be a delicate harmony between creation and destruction, light and shadow. Without that balance, the abyss grew, angry, resentful, and it created the Harbinger as a way to reclaim what was lost. Seraphiel looked at Reverie, his gaze searching. And you think you can fix that? You think you can restore the bond between the abyss and Dormiria? Reverie met his gaze, unwavering. Yes, I can. I've learned to control the abyss, to understand it. But that's only the beginning. We need to restore the pact, the connection between creation and destruction. Only then can we stop the Harbinger. Only then can we heal the wound that has torn the realms apart. Mrs. stepped forward, her brow furrowed. And how do we do that? The abyss is a realm of darkness and chaos. How can we bring it back into alignment with Dormiria's creation? Reverie took a deep breath, feeling the abyss coil around them like a living thing. We'll need to create a new bond, one forged from both sides. We need to reconnect the realms of creation and destruction to bridge the gap that was torn so long ago. But this time, it must be done carefully. With the right balance, we can end the cycle of violence, of constant conflict. We can restore harmony. The dream weavers gathered around, their expressions a mix of hope and skepticism. Reverie's plan was risky, almost impossible to believe. But in the depths of their hearts, they could feel the truth of it, the possibility of healing, of restoring what had been broken. The Harbinger is not an enemy to be defeated, Reverie continued. It's a part of something much larger, something that stretches beyond the realms of creation and destruction. If we can restore the balance, if we can repair the bond between the two realms, we can stop the Harbinger without violence. The abyss will be made whole again, and the rift between creation and destruction will heal. Seraphiel's voice cut through the silence. But how do we know it will work? How do we know the abyss won't reject us again? Reverie paused, considering the question. I've already bridged the gap. I've learned to control the abyss, to understand its nature. What remains is the act of reuniting the realms. It won't be easy, but with your help, we can make it happen. Nissa, ever the skeptic, hesitated for a moment before nodding. If you believe this is the only way, then we'll follow you. But you must be certain. The abyss is unpredictable, and tampering with it could have unforeseen consequences. Reverie met her gaze, their expression unwavering. Uncertain. This is the only way. With their plan set in motion, the group began their journey deeper into the abyss. Reverie led them, their senses attuned to the pulse of the realm, feeling its every shift and change. The air was thick with power, heavy with the weight of both creation and destruction. Each step took them further into the heart of the abyss, where the very fabric of existence twisted and turned, like the beating heart of a world long forgotten. As they approached the center, Reverie could feel the presence of the Harbinger growing stronger. It was there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. But Reverie held firm. This time, they would not fight it. They would heal it. The time had come to restore the balance, to heal the wound that had festered for centuries. You've just heard the final part of Mistwoven Legends, Book 2, Threads of the Forgotten Part 2 by Raul. I'm Nyara, your host and narrator. With the wound of the abyss laid bare and a fragile balance teetering on the edge of restoration, Reverie stands at the precipice of harmony or eternal chaos. But as shadows whisper of deeper betrayals, the true battle for Dormeria's soul has only just begun. What secrets await in the threads yet unwoven? Book 3, Mistwoven Legends, Shadows of the Abyss, on the way soon.